Today we're looking into a really disturbing case. It's tough not just because someone was murdered, but the way it happened and the history behind it. Decades of pain.
Yeah, it's the story of Corinna Smith and her husband, Michael Baines. Married 38 years, and it ended, well, incredibly violently with this concoction. Boiling water and sugar.
Exactly. It sounds almost mundane, doesn't it? Household items. But the reality is chilling.
Absolutely devastating. And the motivation, the why, it seems to stem from this incredibly deep-seated guilt, which then collided with a terrible new allegation.
So our mission today is to trace this chronologically. We'll start with that long history of pain Corinna Smith carried. Then we'll detail the actual attack, how this makeshift weapon was made and used.
And finally, we have to grapple with the legal side, the trial, the sentence, and this really difficult question of justice when the motive involved these very serious but crucially unproven allegations of abuse.
Right. And you mentioned that mixture boiling water and sugar. It's not just randomly cruel. There's a specific reason for it, isn't there?
There is. It's known in, well, let's just say some very dark environments like prisons. They have a name for it because it's designed to cause maximum damage.
What do they call it?
They call it napalm.
Napalm. That tells you everything about the intent behind using it, even if the final outcome wasn't planned to be death.
It speaks volumes about wanting to inflict pain, serious pain.
Okay, let's go back then. Let's start setting the scene for this. Where did all this begin?
So we have Corinna Smith. She was 59 at the time of the incident. And Michael Baines, her husband, quite a bit older, 80 or 81.
And married nearly 4 decades, living in Neston, Cheshire. Seems like a long, stable life together on the surface.
On the surface, yes. But underneath, there was this profound tragedy that happened 13 years earlier. It really overshadowed everything.
That was their son, Craig Baines.
Yes. Craig took his own life back in 2007. He was only 25.
And the sources say he'd had a troubled life, including some time in prison.
That's right. He'd been imprisoned for a serious assault. And this is where the roots of Corinna's later guilt really start to embed themselves.
How so?
Because Craig had told Corinna something before he was imprisoned for that assault. He said the man he attacked, he claimed that man was a pedophile who had sexually touched him, Craig.
Wow. Okay, so that's one layer. An alarming claim made some time ago.
Exactly. Maybe it was dismissed at the time or perhaps not fully investigated. We don't know the specifics of that early reaction. But then comes the second, even more critical moment.
This was just before Craig died.
The day before. He was apparently in a terrible state, really distressed. He went to his mother, to Corinna, and he said, "Mom, he's a pedophile."
And Corinna understood him to mean the same person, the man he'd assaulted.
That's what she understood, yes. But then the very next day, Craig seemed different, calmer, maybe even happier, some accounts suggest.
Oh, no.
And Corinna, seeing him seem better, made that fateful decision. She decided not to push him on it, not to bring up the terrible thing he'd said the day before when he was so distressed.
You can understand why, can't you? Wanting to believe the crisis had passed.
Absolutely. A parent's hope. But then, later that same day, Craig killed himself.
So that conversation, or lack of conversation, became toxic for her.
Utterly toxic. The court really acknowledged this. For 13 years, Corinna lived with this crushing guilt. She believed she'd missed her chance. That maybe, just maybe, if she'd talked to him, explored that claim, things might have been different.
Even though, as the judge later pointed out, she had no real reason to blame herself.
Exactly. Justice Yip made that clear. Logically, she wasn't responsible for Craig's death. But emotionally,
Yeah.
for a grieving mother, she felt she had failed him profoundly.
13 years of carrying that. It's hard to imagine.
It created this narrative in her head.
Yeah.
Self-blame. Constantly replaying that last real conversation, wondering about the what-ifs, particularly about this alleged abuser her son had mentioned.
It sounds like a psychological wound that never healed, just festered.
Precisely. A deep vulnerability. Like you said, a wound waiting for salt to be poured in it. And that's exactly what happened next.
She was essentially primed for something to break, looking for an answer, any answer, to explain Craig's pain and her own guilt.
And unfortunately, the answer she eventually received was the worst possible one, delivered in the most devastating way.
So fast forward 13 years, July 13th, 2020. This is the day everything changes.
This is the day the fuse hits the powder keg we talked about. Corinna's daughter comes to her.
Right.
And she makes these absolutely devastating allegations against Michael Baines, Corinna's husband of 38 years.
What were the allegations specifically?
That Michael Baines had sexually abused children. Not just one, but for many years, according to the claims reported in court.
Okay. That's horrific in itself.
But then came the detail that surely just shattered Corinna's world completely.
Don't tell me.
The allegations specifically included the claim that Michael Baines had sexually abused their son, Craig, the son who took his own life 13 years before, the son whose final distressed words were about a pedophile.
Oh my God. So the person Craig might have been talking about, the person Corinna felt guilty for not confronting, was her own husband.
That was the implication of the daughter's allegations. Suddenly, Corinna's 13 years of guilt, blaming herself for maybe missing some external threat to Craig, it likely just flipped instantly.
Into unimaginable rage and betrayal, directed at the man living in her own house.
The sources say she became incredibly angry and very upset, in a state of extreme distress, which is completely understandable given the context. The guilt she'd carried probably felt resolved in the worst way possible. The monster wasn't out there, it was right beside her.
It's a terrible kind of closure.
A catastrophic kind. But what's really important here for understanding her state of mind is what she did immediately after hearing this.
Did she lash out straight away?
No. And this is key. Her first actions were actually quite rational. She called the police, she reported the allegations.
Okay, so she tried to go through the proper channels first.
Yes, and she did more than that. The court heard evidence that she actually booked and paid for lie detector tests.
Polygraphs. For who?
For her daughter, who made the allegations, and for Michael Baines himself. She was actively seeking verification, trying to find out the truth through some kind of process.
So she believed the allegations the court accepted. She genuinely believed them, but she still initially tried to get proof, or at least test the claims.
Exactly, which makes what happened next even more tragic. She booked these tests, seemingly trying to find clarity, but something snapped in the hours that followed.
What happened in that gap between trying to arrange polygraphs and the attack?
Well, she went home, and the court suggested that it was later that night, while dwelling on these horrific, unproven claims, that the intent to cause harm formed.
It was too much. The idea of waiting for police, for tests.
It seems that way. Remember, she'd waited 13 years for an answer about Craig's pain. Now she believes she had it. The thought of due process, of delays, of the possibility Baines might deny it or get away with it, it must have become unbearable.
That conviction, that certainty she felt, even without proof, just overrode everything else.
It seems like it short-circuited her rational mind. The years of unresolved grief just exploded. Within hours, she went from trying to book a polygraph to meticulously preparing a weapon.
A weapon designed not just to harm, but to inflict maximum suffering.
Precisely. The focus shifted entirely from finding truth to delivering punishment.
And the details of that preparation are, well, they're stomach-turning. This wasn't a quick splash of hot water and anger.
Not at all. This happened late on July 13th, or very early on the 14th. And the process itself shows a terrifying level of determination. She boiled water about 2 full kettles worth.
A significant amount.
A huge amount. But the crucial, horrifying step was adding the sugar. 3 whole bags of it. That's over 6 pounds, about 3 kilograms of sugar dissolved into boiling water.
3 kilograms? Why so much sugar? What does that actually do?
This is where we get back to that term napalm. Detective Chief Inspector Paul Hughes explained it in court. Adding that much sugar dramatically increases the viscosity of the water.
It makes it thicker, stickier.
Exactly. Think about syrup versus water. Boiling water alone is terrible, obviously, but it can run off the skin relatively quickly. This sugary mixture, though, DCI Hughes called it vicious. It clings.
So it stays on the skin longer, transferring more heat?
Precisely. It adheres, prolonging the contact time. The heat penetrates deeper, causing much more severe burns. And as the water component starts to evaporate, you're left with this incredibly hot, sticky, molten sugar substance literally sinking into the skin.
That's just horrific to even visualize. It maximizes the agony.
It's designed, whether consciously or instinctively, to cause catastrophic deep tissue damage. 3rd-degree burns. It's incredibly difficult to treat because it's chemically burning as well as thermally burning.
And the court heard how long this preparation took.
About 13 minutes. Boiling the water, carefully dissolving all that sugar.
13 minutes. That's a long time to be doing something like that. Enough time to reconsider.
It's a critical window. 13 minutes where she could have stopped, called the police again, waited for the lie detector test she'd booked, walked away. But she didn't. She saw it through.
Which points towards premeditation, doesn't it? Or at least a very determined intent formed in that moment.
It was certainly powerful evidence for the prosecution, arguing that this wasn't just a momentary loss of control. It suggested a focused period of creating this specific, cruel weapon.
Okay, so she has this boiling, viscous mixture. What happened next? How did she actually attack Michael?
Michael Baines was asleep in their bed. Some reports suggested he might have been unwell at the time, too, making him even more defenseless.
Just completely unaware.
Completely. And Corinna went into the bedroom and poured the entire quantity, remember, 2 kettles worth, laden with sugar over his arms and torso.
Just poured it onto him while he slept.
Yes, an overwhelming deluge of this scalding, sticky liquid.
The immediate result must have been catastrophic.
The descriptions are harrowing. He was left, quote, in excruciating pain and whimpering in bed. The burns covered 36% of his body. Sources specifically mentioned the skin on his right arm and hand was peeling off right away.
36%? That's a massive surface area for such severe burns.
It's incredibly serious, a testament to just how devastatingly effective that sugar mixture was.
So Baines is horrifically injured, in agony. What did Corinna do right after pouring the mixture on him? Did she try to help, call an ambulance?
No. It seems the shock of her own actions, or perhaps the continuation of her distress, took over. She didn't provide any aid to him at all.
She just left him there.
She fled the house immediately, ran down the street, apparently went about 8 or 9 doors down to a neighbor's house.
Someone she knew well.
No, actually. Sources say it was someone she wasn't particularly close to, which perhaps indicates the level of her panic or distress.
And what happened at the neighbor's house?
The neighbor described her banging on the door, howling in distress, and she apparently confessed almost immediately.
What did she say?
The neighbor reported hearing her say something like, "I've hurt him really bad. I think I've killed him."
So immediate remorse, or shock at least, and the neighbor called the police.
Yes, thankfully. The police arrived very quickly, and when they arrested Corinna, she gave them the motive right away. She told them, "He touched my children."
Straight back to the allegations. No ambiguity about why she did it in her mind.
None whatsoever. Her distress and her stated reason were consistent from the moment she left the house.
There's a detail that seems to contradict this picture of pure howling distress, isn't there? Something the prosecution focused on.
Ah, yes. The cleanup. Before she ran out of the house, before she went to the neighbors, she apparently took the time to tidy up the kitchen.
Tidy up? What does she do?
The court heard she threw the empty sugar bags in the bin, and she mopped the floor where she'd prepared the mixture.
Okay, wait. If you're in a state of pure howling, panic, and distress, having just done something horrific,
Yeah.
do you stop to mop the floor?
That's the question the prosecution posed to the jury, wasn't it? It suggests a level of calculation, presence of mind, an attempt to conceal the evidence of how the weapon was made.
It muddies the water significantly. How can you be both utterly overcome by distress and simultaneously composed enough to clean the crime scene?
It's a psychological puzzle. Maybe it indicates a disconnect. Or maybe the act of cleaning was part of a panicked, irrational attempt to undo what she'd done. Or perhaps it really does show a colder element of planning alongside the emotional turmoil.
The jury must have found that detail pretty compelling when considering murder versus manslaughter.
It definitely leans towards premeditation, or at least a clear intent to cause grievous harm, followed by an attempt to cover her tracks. It certainly complicated the narrative of her acting purely out of sudden, overwhelming distress.
While Corinna is being arrested and telling police why she did it, what's happening with Michael Baines?
He was obviously in critical condition. He was rushed to Whiston Hospital early on July 14th and admitted straight to the specialist burns unit.
With 36% burns, treatment would have been incredibly intensive.
Extremely. He remained in the burns unit for weeks. Initially, his condition was described as stable, which can sometimes happen with severe burns before complications set in.
But the damage was too severe.
Ultimately, yes. Despite the medical care, his condition deteriorated. The risks of infection and organ failure with burns that extensive are enormous.
How long did he survive?
He fought for just over a month. Michael Baines died on August 18th, 2020.
And his death changed everything, legally speaking, for Corinna Smith.
Absolutely. The initial charge was grievous bodily harm, GBH, with intent, most likely, given the weapon used. That's already a very serious charge.
But once he died as a direct result of the injuries she inflicted.
The charge was upgraded to murder. The act itself didn't change, but the outcome crossing that threshold from injury to death meant she now faced a mandatory life sentence if convicted.
Okay, so the case goes to trial. Murder charge. What was the outcome?
It went to Cheshire Crown Court, a 5-day trial, and on June 15th, 2021, the jury found Corinna Smith guilty of murder.
Guilty of murder. So the jury decided she either intended to kill him or at the very least intended to cause him really serious harm, and he died as a result.
That's the legal threshold for murder, yes.
Okay.
The jury was convinced that her actions, particularly the preparation of the napalm mixture and maybe that cleanup afterwards, met that standard.
But then we get to the sentencing, and this is where it gets quite nuanced, isn't it? With the judge, Justice Amanda Yip.
Extremely nuanced. This is really the crux of the judicial dilemma. Justice Yip sentenced Smith to life imprisonment, which is mandatory for murder in the UK. She set the minimum term Smith must serve before being eligible for parole at 12 years.
12 years minimum for what sounds like a premeditated, incredibly cruel murder. That seems potentially low on the scale.
It does seem relatively low compared to some murder sentences.
Yeah.
And that's because of the specific basis on which Justice Yip decided to sentence her. This is critical.
What was that basis?
She explicitly stated that she was sentencing Smith on the basis that her intention was to cause serious harm rather than to kill.
Hold on, how does that square with the jury's murder verdict? I thought murder required intent to kill or cause grievous bodily harm.
It does. The jury found one of those intents was present. But the judge, when deciding the minimum term for the mandatory life sentence, has discretion to consider mitigating factors. Justice Yip clearly placed significant weight on Smith's mental state.
The distress, the 13 years of guilt.
Exactly. The judge accepted Smith was in a state of extreme distress when she formed the intent. She specifically said this was not a long-held and carefully formed plan. By accepting it was more spontaneous, driven by that sudden devastating revelation combined with years of trauma, she could justify a lower minimum term.
So the judge wasn't overturning the jury's verdict of murder, but she was interpreting the nature of the intent behind it as being driven by immediate trauma, not cold-blooded planning, which affected the tariff.
Precisely. It's a complex distinction. The jury says murder, the judge says life sentence, but I accept the intent was formed under immense duress, therefore the minimum term will be 12 years.
And what happens after those 12 years? Is she just free?
No. This is another crucial point often missed. She'll be eligible for parole after 12 years. Minus time already served. But even if released, she remains unlicensed for the rest of her life.
For life, what does that mean, practically?
It means the state retains oversight. Strict conditions on where she lives, who she contacts, her behavior. Any breach at any point in the future, she can be recalled to prison immediately. It's not like parole ending after a few years. It's a lifelong leash.
Okay. Now, the massive elephant in the room throughout all of this. The allegations against Michael Baines, what did the court conclude about whether they were true?
Absolutely nothing definitive. And Justice Yip was crystal clear on this. The trial was about whether Corinna Smith murdered Michael Baines. It was not equipped, nor was it its purpose, to determine the truth of the historical sexual abuse allegations.
So they remained just at allegations?
Unproven. Exactly. The prosecution accepted two key things: that the allegations were made by the daughter, and that Corinna Smith genuinely believed them when she acted. But belief doesn't equal proof in a court of law.
Which leads to the core tragedy of vigilantism, doesn't it?
It really does. Justice Yip addressed this head-on. She acknowledged the allegations provided some explanation for Smith's actions, but stated unequivocally they cannot provide an excuse.
Because
Because by killing Baines, Smith destroyed any possibility of the truth ever being legally established. She took away everyone's right to a fair trial to answer those allegations. The principle of innocent until proven guilty was completely bypassed.
And the consequences of that ripple outwards, right, to the rest of the family.
Devastatingly so. The allegations are left hanging, unresolved, a permanent question mark. The judge spoke about the untold pain this caused Baines' other children, presumably from previous relationships.
They lose their father, and his memory is forever tainted by horrific, unproven claims.
Exactly. They submitted statements about their love for him, their grief, their shock. Smith, in her attempt to find justice for her own son based on her belief, ended up denying any form of legal resolution or certainty for everyone else involved, including potentially real victims, if the allegations were true, and the family members left in limbo.
So when you piece it all together, it's just an almost unbearable cycle. 13 years of deep, corrosive guilt colliding with a sudden, horrific revelation.
Which then fuels an act of vengeance, an act carried out with a really specific, calculated cruelty using that sugar mixture.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it, of what can happen when someone becomes utterly convinced they have the truth, especially in answer to years of pain, and decides the legal process is just too slow, or inadequate.
Absolutely. She had those initial rational steps, calling the police, booking the polygraphs, but the sheer emotional weight of believing she finally knew who was behind her son's suffering just overwhelmed everything. Perspective was lost.
And in losing that perspective, she denied justice in its truest sense. Not just for Baines, the accused, but potentially for the alleged victims, and certainly for the family left behind with nothing but unanswered questions and grief.
Yeah, the cost of taking the law into her own hands was absolute. It created more questions than answers, more pain than resolution.
It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? That incredibly specific, painful method, the napalm, was choosing that truly about delivering a punishment fitting the alleged crime in her mind? Or was it, perhaps unconsciously, also about purging her own immense, unbearable guilt from all those years, inflicting a pain that somehow mirrored her own internal agony?
That's a really unsettling thought to end on. Was the cruelty directed solely outwards, or was it also in some twisted way self-inflicted through the act itself? Something to definitely mull over.